If you like what I do, consider joining my channel or donating to my coffee. Links in the description. Throne room? More like a bone room, am I right? Gal Guardians Servants of the Dark is a sequel to 2023's Grim Guardians, Gal Guardians Demon Purge. Gotta change up that name here in the States for trademark reasons. And Gal Guardians is a spin-off of the Gal Gun series about... You know what? I don't know what that game's about, and I'm not willing to do the research to find out. And I didn't play through Gal Guardians Demon Purge because it wasn't a Metroidvania, so I can only hope that Gal Gun's horny didn't spill into Servants of the Dark. Of course it did. This is the second game in a row I reviewed covered in a thin smattering of horny. I really hope this doesn't become a trend. Okay, so Gal Gun beget Gal Guardians Demon Purge, that beget the subject of this video, Gal Guardians Servants of the Dark, a true blue Metroidvania. In Servants of the Dark, you play as Kirika and Masha, demonic maids and sisters returning from vacation to find their lord's castle in shambles. Upon their lord's defeat, the sisters vow to reassemble their master and exact revenge on their treacherous ex-maid. It's weird, it's silly, and it's anime as f***. So, you know I'm down. But does this goofy premise make for a great foundation for a great Metroidvania?
Combat.
First off, I want to let you know that Gal Guardians Servants of the Dark is co-op. But because I don't have any friends who live near me and my daughters only play Fortnite and The Legend of Zelda, I had to go this outing alone. But that's okay, because I prefer single-player games anyway. It's just a much more peaceful life. That being said, yes, you get to control both demon maids at the same time. Well, not exactly at the same time. You can switch between them with the press of a button. And each maid comes with their own life pools and attacks, so switching them often and strategically is a good idea. So, which maid is which? The pink-haired Kirika totes a submachine gun, and the green-haired Masha strikes enemies down with her vine whip. Each sister has their strengths and weaknesses. Kirika has longer range because she has a frickin' gun, and she can run out of bullets, leaving herself vulnerable while reloading. Additionally, her bullets do a measly amount of damage compared to Masha's whip. But the trade-off? Masha has to get in close and personal if she wants to get in any hits, which risks her taking damage. It's a simple trade-off of benefits and disadvantages between the sisters that makes each feel unique, but one having a whip and the other a gun isn't their only differences. Kirika also has a very powerful shotgun she can use for close encounters, and Masha gets a backdash she can incorporate into her combos, as well as an assortment of consumable seeds she can throw at enemies, with each seed doing a different attack with a different elemental attribute. And to add on to that, each sister can equip sub-weapons, with some sub-weapons being exclusive to certain sisters. Sub-weapons are weapons enemies drop that you can then equip to the sisters. Each sister can equip 2 sub-weapons per loadout, 1 weapon per sub-weapon button. Sub-weapons are very diverse, ranging from knives you can throw diagonally, to demon swords you can summon to attack enemies, to freaking grenades. They can also provide utility, like a lantern that brightens dark areas, and a lance that can destroy certain walls blocking your path. And it's because of these utility-focused sub-weapons that I really came to appreciate the option for sub-weapon loadouts. It's a small thing, but I would have hated to rummage through the menu every time I needed to light a room or something. I feel like I've barely even scratched the surface of Gal Guardians combat, as there are so many different things you can unlock, but I don't want to spoil everything you can get. But I do want to briefly mention Maxim's demonic powers. Maxim's the little dude following you around, by the way. One of the first demon skills you unlock is a way to heal, and it's such a game changer because enemies in this game hit very hard. And this healing power charges over time, making it even more helpful, especially because you can unlock multiple demon powers that use the same demon energy, so making this resource rechargeable was a good move. I just wish they did the same for DP, the energy needed for sub-weapons. There were so many times I'd burn through my DP minutes into an excursion, rendering my sub-weapons useless. Granted, enemies can drop blue pots that replenish some DP, but it was too few and far between. And though I said Maximum's demonic healing is a game changer because enemies hit so hard, it's actually really difficult to die in this game. And it's not because the game's too easy, it's because there are so many mechanics that make dying difficult. Not only can you heal with Maximum's powers, but you can also use items in your inventory to heal, both HP and DP. And if you do die, there's a skill where you can switch sisters real quick, preventing the fatal blow and healing them slightly. And if you miss this opportunity, you can resuscitate the sister as long as you can press the button quick enough before an enemy stops you. And you can resuscitate your sisters infinitely. So, how do I feel about all these mechanics that basically make you unkillable? I love them. I like to feel empowered when I play video games, and leveraging the idea of sisters tagging each other out and reviving each other makes sense narratively and mechanically. And it's just flat out charming and fun. And if these mechanics make the game too easy for you, just don't use them, I guess. The game also has multiple difficulty settings if you're really looking for a challenge, which you can change anytime you load up the game. So yeah, with all these failsafe mechanics, the game has the potential to be pretty darn easy. And this easiness extended to its bosses. On the default normal difficulty, given that I use items and Maximum's heal power, I was pretty much able to face tank most of the game's bosses. Though later bosses required me to engage much more to survive, especially against the final boss, who I thought was a lot of fun. These bosses being too easy wasn't a big deal to me, but I know it can be a big deal to some MV enjoyers. So, if you want a challenge in Gal Guardians, I recommend upping the difficulty and limiting the use of some of the game's mechanics. That's it for combat. Gal Guardians Servants of the Dark offers a robust and varied combat system that feels both strategic and empowering. The ability to switch between the sisters, each with their own strengths, weaknesses, and abilities, makes for an engaging dynamic, and the sheer number of sub-weapons keeps things fresh. While the game provides plenty of mechanics that make dying difficult, these systems contribute to a more fun and flexible experience rather than trivializing the challenge. And for those craving a greater test of skill, difficulty settings and self-imposed restrictions offer plenty of ways to keep things interesting.
Abilities. Platforming.
Gal's abilities are pretty standard, though there's a pretty uncommon one in the bunch. The girls get double jumps and air dashes as they level up, more on that in the next section, but their more interesting abilities are found in the sub-weapons and Maximum's demonic powers. I mentioned in the last section how sub-weapons have utilities like lighting dark rooms and breaking walls, and I think that's really cool when MV's weapons pull double duty. But the ability that steals the show is the Demon Dash, where the girls basically turn into a meteor and plow through enemies. Not only is it a viable way to deal damage and is necessary to traverse certain areas, but it just makes traveling around the demon realm that much quicker and fun. My one critique about some of the late game abilities, and heck, even some of the early game combat maneuvers, is that the game does a poor job at telling you how to activate these skills. The devs are aware of this and are working on improved tutorials, so this may not even be an issue within a week. As for the game's platforming, it's pretty solid stuff. You'll mostly be jumping around, avoiding enemies and hazards, but there are so many cool oddities and biome-specific gimmicks that keep the game fresh. Like navigating dark areas and maneuvering around lava pits and avoiding water that rends your body of its soul. Also, spider chandeliers, yuck. And there's so much more that I don't want to spoil, such as environmental manipulation that I won't be showing here. It actually surprised me with some of the stuff you could do during your travels. It's just a whole lot of fun. As far as puzzles go, it really comes down to levers raising gates. Don't get me wrong, there's some other one-offs that kind of blew my mind, like secret wall breaks and the aforementioned environmental manipulation, but mostly you'll be finding levers to raise gates. It's fine, but sometimes you'll hit a lever and there'll be no indication as to what it did, and that kind of guesswork is kind of a bummer. That's it for abilities and platforming. Gal Guardians Servants of the Dark keeps its traversal abilities familiar, but spices things up with utility-focused sub-weapons and Maximum's demonic powers. The Demon Dash, in particular, adds a satisfying mix of speed and power, making exploration even more enjoyable. Platforming is solid, with plenty of biome-specific gimmicks to keep things fresh, though the puzzles lean heavily on lever flipping with occasional moments of confusion. While nothing here reinvents the wheel, the variety of mechanics and creative level design ensure that movement stays fun and engaging from start to finish.
Progression.
Strap in, boys. We got a lot to talk about here. So I'm going to do this in two parts. First part, we'll discuss generalities, what progression looks like and all the things you can do to improve your characters. The second part, I want to talk about my experiences with the game's progression systems because it's very interesting to say the least. First, what's progression look like in Gal Guardians? On the MV spectrum, we're looking at an unorthodox Metroidvania with a unique leveling system, which I'll dive into here in a bit. The game has gear, but it's also non-traditional. Instead of equipping breastplates and greaves, the girls can pick up medallions and sub-weapons from chests or as enemy drops. Medallions are basically your accessories that add all kinds of cool stuff to your repertoire, from something as basic as increasing stats to something mechanically significant like giving you extra jumps. Sub-weapons are just that, weapons, mostly. You can initially equip 2 sub-weapons at a time, with multiple loadouts getting unlocked as you level up. Loadouts are pretty handy in this game because there are some sub-weapons that are less weapons and more utility. Like the lantern that can heal you or light up the way, and the javelin that busts up certain walls. So yeah, having multiple loadouts is always a godsend. One loadout for DPS, an anti-air loadout, and a utility loadout for each girl. The only issue I had with these sub-weapons is that there were so freaking many of them. And I'm not just talking about variety, because that's a good thing. I'm talking about volume. Numerous times during my playthrough, I'd become over-encumbered by all the sub-weapons I collected. Nothing mechanically happens when you get over-encumbered, other than your inventory looks like a mess and you can't pick anything else up. Thankfully, the game has options for you. You can reorganize your mess, or you can go to the castle and do some things with a couple of NPCs. Let's talk about Lord Maxim's castle, which is this game's hub town. Here, you'll find all the corpses of the Lord's deceased servants. Yeah, it's not a very pleasant area to visit at first, but things are a little different in the Demon Realm. One of the game's coolest side quests involves the girls finding and returning the servants' souls back to their bodies, as well as finding demon timber to fix the place up. And many of these revived servants provide services, like allowing you to change the game's difficulty, or providing you unlimited seeds if you bring her 3 types of any seed, or this Chad who makes you boxed lunches. And as you rebuild the castle with demon timber, he'll make you even better boxed lunches. What a freaking Chad! But my other favorite NPCs are the ones who help me with my sub-weapon mess. The Mimic NPC, I guess, stores items for you, or maybe he just eats them and you never see them again. The game wasn't very clear on this, but the game isn't very clear on a lot of things, but we'll get to that. The other NPC who helps with sub-weapons is this spider dude who really loves money. He'll sell you sub-weapons, move attributes from one sub-weapon to another, and he'll synthesize sub-weapons, which means he can combine multiple sub-weapons to create stronger versions. But, of course, you need cash to pull that off. Gal Guardian's economy is interesting. For the large part, money comes easy and you won't need to worry about it too much because I didn't find anyone in the early game who wanted my money. I was a good few hours in before I found my first merchant. But then there was a spot later on that I'll talk about in part 2 of this progression section where money was sparse and the lack of it felt like a significant blocker. But other than that part, money wasn't too much of an issue in Gal Guardians, especially if you found fountains while exploring. Fountains are all over the Demon Realm, and each of these fountains connect to the central fountain at the castle. Interacting with the castle's fountain gives you money. The longer you don't interact with the fountain, the more money it would give you. And each fountain you found in the world multiplies the amount of money you get with each interaction. By the end game, I was a thousandaire, baby! Okay, that ends the generalities part of Gal Guardian's progression. There's leveling, gear, and a hub area that you can build up by finding servants' souls and demon timber. And there's a strong economy where you can spend cash for services in the castle or at merchants hidden throughout the Demon Realm. Alright, now we've hit part 2 of the progression section, my experiences. This part isn't going to be all negative, mind you, but there are some things I want to talk about because Gal Guardians does a lot of unique things that I appreciate, but some of their implementation didn't land. But some did. Anyway, let's talk about it. First, let's talk about obtaining those abilities. Unlike most MVs where you find abilities in the wild or gain an ability from defeating a boss, the girls get abilities by either finding a sub-weapon or by leveling up. Leveling is different in Gal Guardians. Instead of gathering XP by virtue of killing things, you instead get XP by returning Maxim's bones to his throne room. After returning so many bones, you get a level up, and each level has the potential to increase your HP, attack, and DP. Certain milestone levels grant the girls new abilities, such as extra jumps and air dashes. This is a really cool and unique system that I loved, but it does come with its drawbacks. To understand the system's drawbacks, we gotta talk about bone collecting. Initially, I thought bones were rare items you only got from defeating bosses or finding hidden chests. But it turns out, bones can be dropped randomly from regular old enemies. This was an unexpected surprise I found very interesting. Whenever a game rewards me for killing enemies, I engage more with its combat and ultimately have a much better and memorable experience. That's why I prefer Igavanias. Anyway, you remember how I said you can only level up by bringing bones back to the throne room, and that I thought that was a cool and unique system that I loved, but it also comes with its drawbacks? Yeah, one of the drawbacks is that you can only level up at the throne room. This isn't inherently an issue. Honestly, I loved the prospect of collecting a bunch of bones and then returning to the throne room just to see how many levels I'd get. You gotta love watching those numbers increase. No, the issue comes in the game's lack of early game fast travel. In the beginning, returning to the throne room almost always resulted in a huge run back. But not to the throne room. Getting to the throne room was easy. Just go to a save point and fast travel there. Unfortunately, it's a one-way trip. For some reason, the throne room does not have fast travel back to your save point. So anytime you went to the throne room to level up, you were expected to run all the way back to the save point you traveled from. At one point in the early game, I had so many bones, but I didn't want to return to the throne room because it'd take me around 20 minutes to return to the place I was leaving. I opted not to do that and instead just carried on, underleveled and over-encumbered by demon bones. Later on, you'll unlock a waypoint fast travel system and even a waypoint in the castle, but obtaining this castle waypoint is missable as it's one of the servant's souls hidden in the world. So, there's a very real chance you may never obtain a way to fast travel out of the castle. Thankfully, I found that NPC and never had to deal with this. And the game is designed with a bunch of unlockable shortcuts to make backtracking not so tedious, but man, it's rough going in the beginning. This cumbersome fast travel in the early game isn't a deal breaker by any means, as the mid to late game's fast travel is actually pretty good, but I can't help to think about how much more improved the player experience would be if you could just use the throne room to fast travel at least to your previous save point. Okay, on to my second and last scenario I want to cover about my experience with Gal Guardian's progression system. And this one paints the game in a good light. Essentially, I got stuck pretty hard in the game. I had a few leads, but every lead was a dead end that required a presumed ability I didn't have. Naturally, I presumed this ability I was lacking needed to be obtained via leveling, as most of my abilities were obtained this way. So, the grind was on for bones. And let me tell you, I was not having a good time. For some reason, enemies just stopped dropping bones, so after a few minutes of unfruitful grinding, I decided to buy the large bone from a merchant. Problem was, it was $8,000 and I only had like 2,000 bucks. So, back to the grind. And let me tell you, enemies in this game drop very little cash. I estimated that it would take me hours to grind the cash needed to buy that large bone, and it was at this point I said to myself, this is stupid. There is no way the devs would do this to me. And spoilers, I was right. The devs were, in fact, not cruel and did not intend for me to grind for hours. What they intended for me to do was to explore more. So I did. And let me tell you, it was awesome. I had missed so much and felt so relieved when I started finding chests full of bones. I also learned that enemies in a biome will eventually stop dropping bones in an effort to prevent overleveling. So, not only was I finding new paths and new chests with bones, but I was also collecting bones again from enemies. It was an epiphany that lifted me from my funk and got me super excited to play the game again. This raises the question, is this good design? Was making this part of the game so tight on bones that it forced players to backtrack and explore a good move? I'm gonna say yeah, I thought it was a great move. It really got my gray matter going in a way that most MVs don't. I knew grinding was not the answer, and though it's great to have that option, I appreciate that the game wanted to genuinely challenge me by creating this mechanical wall to overcome. But I could be reading too much into it. I mean, had I actually did a good job exploring in the first place, I never would have ran into this dilemma. But I wanted to share this experience because I don't want people to get too frustrated or think grinding is the only way out of this part of the game. Just explore the world thoroughly and remember that enemies will eventually stop dropping bones. And when that happens, try killing enemies in another biome.
Exploration.
Well, I kinda went through a majority of exploration in the progression section, so I'll be brief with the generalities. First and foremost, is exploration in Gal Guardians rewarding? You bet your tight, well-fitted, demonic maid outfit it is. There's a lot to see thanks to biome diversity and excellent art direction. And there's lots to find. Chests, sub-weapons, cache, medallions, bones, fountains, servant souls. Almost around every corner, there's something cool to find or something hidden to discover. One thing I will say about exploring the Demon Realm is that I got lost and stuck a lot, despite the fact that the game places your current objective on the map. I found this to be very impressive. Gal Guardian's map design was rarely straightforward, demanding players to circumnavigate and find unexpected ways to their next destination. I can see how this might frustrate some players, but as a hardcore Metroidvania enthusiast, I loved it. Speaking of the in-game map, I found it to be okay. It's a grid-based affair lacking details, but it did place most points of interest automatically. It tracked the locations of chests and whether you opened them or not, fast travel waypoints, merchants, stuff like that. But it wasn't completely dummy-proof, as it didn't tell you where certain abilities were needed. That's what manual markers were for. And I recommend using them, as you will come across a lot of breakable walls that you'll have to return to, so you might as well make note of them now. My one critique of the game's exploration is that I didn't really understand why I was going to places I was going to sometimes. The game's a pretty linear affair, but it does offer plenty of moments to go off the beaten path to find secrets and hidden items. But at one point, the game forks and allows you to choose where you want to go, offering a little non-linearity. The problem was, I felt like reaching these particular destinations didn't do much to advance the plot. In all honesty, it felt like I got to these places and then the game wanted me to turn around immediately as if touching my destination was good enough. Now, of course, things happen that advance the plot on the way to these places, especially in the desert area, but once you reach your destination, the game's like, good enough, now turn around. I guess what I'm saying is this particular town I visited felt very underdeveloped and misused. Thus, I would wager that it's going to be DLC down the line. I mean, it's a coliseum you can't fight in. If that's not a green flag for a possible DLC, I don't know what is. And I guess that's really it for exploration, as I covered so much in the progression section this time around. Gal Guardians Servants of the Dark offers a world that's rich with secrets, diverse biomes, and plenty of hidden rewards, making every detour worthwhile. While the level design can be complex and might leave some players scratching their heads, I personally enjoyed the challenge of navigating its labyrinthine world. The map is serviceable, if not a bit bare bones, but the ability to place manual markers helps keep track of key locations. If you're the kind of player who loves uncovering every hidden room and secret passage, Gal Guardians absolutely delivers on that front.
Atmosphere. Narrative.
I only have one word for you. Inti Creates. Do I have to say anything else? Inti Creates has an impressive pedigree that speaks for itself. The Mega Man 0 and ZX series, Mega Man 9 and 10, the Gunvolt series, the Blaster Master Zero series, Bloodstained Curse of the Moon series, Gal Gun. I still don't know. Point is, Inti Creates is a legendary game developer, so let me tell you, I had high expectations going into Gal Guardians. And guess what? They shattered my expectations as usual. Not only are the pixel work and portraits top tier, but every aspect of the game's presentation is such high quality. The opening movie, the voice acting with every character, the environments and backgrounds, the music, all of it is top shelf stuff. I could argue the sound design mixing sounds like it could use some fine tuning, as the girls' voices overpower the relatively quiet music and sound effects, but it wasn't that big of a deal, honestly. Though you will hear the same lines from the girls every time they jump. Also not an issue for me, I just thought it was funny. The game does have a nice veneer of horny smattered on its surface. Skimpy outfits, girls with big breasts, jiggle physics, literal fan service in a couple of parts. I don't mind stuff like this because I'm a dude, but I know it bothers some people, so I figured I'd mention it. Though, the game is self-aware and has a pretty hilarious fourth wall breaking moment when you fight the Garden Queen. I'll let you discover that on your own, but I actually LOL'd out loud. And really, silliness is this game's general tone, and I'm always a sucker for lighthearted Metroidvanias. Every character is charming, the girls themselves are fun, and their interactions with Lord Maxim were my favorite. You know, for a demon lord, he's actually a pretty cool dude who cares about his subjects. It's tropes like these I find endearing. And yes, this game has a lot of anime tropes and cliches, but fight me, I guess, because I love them. Maxim even breaks the fourth wall and asks one girl if she's a tsundere. I don't know what to tell you, boys. I love this shit. As for the narrative and writing, it's good stuff. Like I mentioned, the game's overall tone is goofy, and every character in the game brings their own goofy charm. And the plot is pretty simplistic, meaning that the characters and their interactions have a heavy lift to immerse you in its world. And I'm happy to report that the characters do just that. It could be my weeb bias, but I love this game's atmosphere and characters so much. They're all just so goofy and fun to be around, especially Lord Maxim. He might be my favorite character. Or the spider dude and his love for money. The last thing I want to bring up is that this game has multiple endings. I did not get the game's true ending, but I'm pretty sure you get it by maxing out your level before beating the game. I'll have to try that later, as I fully intend to play through this game again to see if I can 100% it. That's it for this section. Gal Guardians Servants of the Dark delivers everything I expect from Inti Creates. Stellar pixel art, high-energy music, smooth voice acting, and top-tier anime nonsense. This game's self-aware, leans into its tropes, and somehow manages to be both ridiculous and endearing at the same time. From the over-the-top characters to Lord Maxim's surprisingly chill demeanor, there's an undeniable charm to the game's world and writing. Sure, the girls repeat their lines a lot, and the horny factor is turned up to 11 at some points, but that's all part of the package. And honestly, I loved every second of it. With multiple endings to uncover and plenty of personality-packed moments, Gal Guardians nails its atmosphere, making it a joy to experience from start to finish.
Final thoughts and score.
Gal Guardians Servants of the Dark is an absolute blast. Inti Creates delivers another rock-solid Metroidvania with fun combat, deep progression, and a boatload of charm. The dual character system and creative sub-weapons make encounters engaging, and the game's packed with secrets, lots of things to find, and unique biome gimmicks to keep things fresh. That said, there are some rough edges. The early game fast travel situation is frustrating. Sub-weapon inventory management can be overwhelming, and the lack of effective tutorials for your skills and abilities left me confused at points. But honestly, none of that detracted from my enjoyment. Between the gorgeous pixel art, the excellent voice acting, and the sheer amount of content packed into this demon-infested adventure, I found myself completely hooked. Whether you're playing solo or in co-op, Gal Guardians is a fun Metroidvania for fans who love action-packed gameplay, quirky characters, and a touch of anime absurdity. It's a game that rewards exploration and a strategic use of its combat mechanics. And if you don't mind a bit of horny in your gothic demon castle, you're in for one of a time. I award Gal Guardians Servants of the Dark an 8.5 out of 10. Gal Guardians Servants of the Dark is available on PC, Nintendo Switch, and PlayStation 4 and 5. The Xbox versions have been delayed, and new dates will be announced at a later time. Physical editions for PlayStation 5 and Nintendo Switch are planned for release in June 2025. A quick note for my arachnophobic friends, there are spiders in this game. The blacksmith spider is pretty chill and cartoony, and so are the spider sub-weapons you can summon. But the spider chandeliers, these things kind of freak me out. and there's a few of them in the game you have to ride on. I played Gal Guardians Servants of the Dark exclusively on the Steam Deck with 0 issues. Therefore, I give the game a Steam Deck rating of verified.
Pair placement.
Gal Guardians Servants of the Dark is an incredibly fun and charming Metroidvania with a unique dual-character system, excellent combat mechanics, and top-tier pixel art courtesy of Inti Creates. While the game leans on the easier side due to its many failsafes, its deep progression, engaging exploration, and anime-inspired humor make it a joy to play. That said, some aspects hold it back from absolute greatness. The cumbersome early game fast travel and occasional difficulty spikes in progression can be frustrating to more casual MV enjoyers. But despite these nitpicks, Gal Guardians offers a highly enjoyable adventure filled with action, exploration, and demon-slaying mayhem. Gal Guardians Servants of the Dark swaps its way into the B tier. I did my best to be unbiased in this review, but it's apparent that I like this game a lot. I'm a sucker for its anime-ness and thought a lot of its design choices were really unique, like how you have to level up by collecting bones and how abilities were gained through leveling up. This gave the game a feeling of progression I haven't experienced in an MV before. I liked it so much, you could say this game was made for me.